Hello and welcome to the Brad Davidson Show. This is episode 9, and I am your host, Brad Davidson. Today I want to spend a little time focusing on men. I spend a lot of time talking about female metabolism, and I want to give a little shout out to the guys and address something that I've seen a lot of over my years, and that this is the idea around low testosterone. And I don't know if it's so much about the low testosterone, but that's definitely one of the symptoms that we hear about a lot. I learned about this the hard way. In 2008, 2009, I was training the U.S. bobsled team, and I was on a mission. I was in my mid-30s. I was training super hard, twice a day, 6 days a week. I was avoiding carbs because back then I thought they were horrible for you. I was under a ton of stress, working hard, running a gym, had a child on the way, and I was competing at an international level of sport. And it was an awesome experience. It was fun. It was challenging to really see what it took to compete at that level and to train at that level. But something interesting happened to me. At a certain point, I just crashed. I remember during that time, I got to a point where like between workouts, I was drinking a Red Bull just to get to the next workout. I wasn't sleeping well. I wanted to sleep, but I couldn't sleep. I was getting up early to train clients, get a workout in, train more clients, get another workout, train more clients, get home late at night. And it just constantly went. And the harder I trained, the longer it went, the worse my sleep was. And I got to a point where my whole body just crashed. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't function. I was a train wreck, headaches. It was horrible. And I remember waking up one morning and patches of hair had fallen out of my beard and I couldn't explain it. So I went to see the doctor and I just said, look, this hair was here last night. I don't know what's going on. I said, but I need you to run some labs on me and help me out because one, I feel horrible, and two, it looks horrible. And I don't know what's going on. At that point, I thought I was doing everything really well. We tell you, work out really hard. Right? Guys, especially, work out really hard, get jacked, don't eat carbs, be super healthy, right? The more muscle you have, the leaner you are, the healthier you are. And I really bought into that. And at that point, on the outside, I looked like that. Gosh, I was 30 pounds bigger than I am now. I was a big dude, and I was explosive and powerful and fast and lean and all those things. And I thought I was doing everything right, but I just felt horrible. And the doctor ran my labs, and a couple of days later, he called me. He's like, hey, man, we got some problems. Start off with, you're a type 2 diabetic. I'm like, how in the world can that be possible? I'm lifting weights and that's supposed to help with it, right? I haven't had carbs in like 10 months. Like, there's no way I'm a type 2 diabetic. He goes, I don't know what to tell you, but you are. And second, your thyroid is completely destroyed. Like, you are not generating any thyroid hormone. It's amazing you have any energy. And then third, your hormones have just completely collapsed. On a man's hormone profile, average normal is anywhere from 300 to 1200. I was 102. Like, I was making no testosterone whatsoever. I was literally a walking train wreck. I walked into this doctor's office, bleeding on epitome of health. I'm walking out at that point, and I got my drugs for my blood sugar issues. I got my drugs for my hormones, and I got my drugs for my thyroid. But the conversation I had with the doctor was like, what did I do wrong? And he goes, absolutely nothing. He goes, I don't even know how to explain this. He's like, you're like the epitome of health. It's all the things we want to see people do. Exercise really hard, eat really clean. And he goes, I have no idea how to explain this. And he's like, I'm sorry, I don't have any answers for you. I know these drugs will help you and they'll keep you alive. And so I walked out of his office realizing I am closer to death than I am to optimal living, but hey, I look great. It took me 6 years to recover from that. And I had a really hard time finding answers on what had happened. And what's interesting, over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with incredibly high-performing people, professional athletes, special forces, like these men and women that are just killing it in life. And so many of them are dealing with the same things I was dealing with as I was learning about this stuff. And so what I want to share with you is what I have learned, like what causes this? And then two, how do you beat it? And I'm just going to share my experience and just be kind of open and honest with you. It's not the funnest thing to share, but it's just reality. And as I started to work with more and more of these incredibly high-performing people, realizing, oh my God, if this is breaking men and women that are performing at that level, it's gonna break people not performing at that level. Like, we have to find some solutions to this. And one of the first people that I heard about, that I listened to and learned from, Dr. Kurt Parsley. He was a Navy SEAL that became the doctor for the Navy SEALs. And he actually coined this thing called operator syndrome. And what he started finding was that all these men in the SEALs were having these same experiences: low testosterone, low thyroid, elevated cortisol levels, memory issues, cognition issues, massive sleep issues, energy fatigue, like just crazy symptoms. And no one had any answer for it. And so he started digging in on it. And he presented such really cool information on that. It was kind of one of my first lights of like, oh, I'm not alone in this. I'm seeing this. And now finally a doctor is stepping in and recognizing, hey, this is happening. This is real. And he was the one that first started teaching me the complications of it all and how you fix it was my study of him. So if you have these same feelings that I'm talking about, low energy, no sex drive, you can't sleep, you're irritable, right? Your body fat's starting to increase, right? Or maybe you're super lean, but you just have no drive to even work out. You can't sleep. Like he's a guy I highly recommend you go check out because this stuff is really good. But what I learned with this was that the biggest cause of my demise was my inability to sleep. And what happens when you don't sleep, it elevates stress hormones. And when your stress hormones elevated, it makes it harder to sleep. So I started playing off each other. The way that I was training was driving my stress hormones through the roof. And then I was avoiding carbs. Like one great tool that I could use to help calm me down, I took out of my life. So everything I was doing was just driving stress hormones through the roof. And then I couldn't sleep, and I was making it worse, and I was just playing back and forth with each other. Dr. Parsley says that's one of the biggest issues is the sleep disruption. That if you are not sleeping well, it does not matter what else you do, nothing's going to work. You have to get sleep dialed in. I talk a lot on this podcast about sleep, and we'll get into a little bit more because I want to go above and beyond that as well. The other thing that he found was that traumatic brain injuries can have a massive impact on your body's ability to generate hormones, create sleep, brain inflammation. All these things dramatically disrupt this as well. I specifically remember when it happened to me. I mean, I played high school football, college football. I had multiple concussions. But I specifically remember the last time I was in a bobsled in Lake Placid. I took a run, hit a hard corner. I hit my head on the bottom of the sled, and I was knocked out. And I don't remember the second half of the run. We hit the end. I didn't pull the brakes. I was out. I didn't really think anything of it. I was just in a weird spot. And I remember walking in downtown Lake Placid. I was trying to walk on a curb around a car, and I couldn't balance on the curb. And I knew something was wrong. And like a knucklehead, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to tell anybody that I was hurt. I didn't want to risk losing any position. I was fighting hard. I was a scrub on the team. I was trying to work my way up into this, and I didn't want to stop. So I didn't say anything. But I've never been the same since that day. Like everything came crashing down on me. It wasn't long after that day where my whole metabolism crashed. But what he talks about is the influence that that brain damage has on generating hormones and all those things. And there's now studies coming out that's showing, it was done on 3,000 football players, showing how many of them had concussions or brain injuries that also suffer from low hormones. You see, it's your brain, the hypothalamus pituitary, to communicate to the testes to make more testosterone. If that gets disrupted, it's over. Like you're not making sex hormones. You have to do things to rebalance the brain, calm the brain down. There's all kinds of things that has to be done to bring that back into play. And I'm just going to kind of share with you what I've done over the years to get myself back to a decent place. And I'll be really honest with you. I'm still not the same person I was before all that. I don't think I ever will be, but I'm doing my best to get the highest potential possibility I can be as to where I was before all this happened to me. And then what I want to share with you is just strategies and tools, especially as we get older. I'm turning 48 here in a week or 2 weeks. It just gets harder and harder as we get older. So if you have these symptoms, these feelings, right? The low drive, that's drive for life, sex drive for work, all that stuff. You're sluggish, you're forgetful. ADD is a common symptom that creeps in with this. I definitely had really bad bouts of that. It's still there, but not as bad. I get a little more controlled. But you're irritable, you're anxious, you don't want to work out much anymore. If you are working out, you're getting the results, crazy food cravings, all these things. And you go have your blood chemistry done, and boom, you have low testosterone. And then the easiest solution is, just start taking testosterone injections, to take these drugs to balance the hormones out. And yes, that will work, but you have to address the underlying issues. And the two biggest ones that I see that I've learned about, that I believe in as well, is one, you're under way too much stress and you don't know how to be resilient to it. And two, your sleep is off. Third, a lot of you, if you've been a past athlete, concussions may have played into it as well, or traumatic brain injuries could have played into this as well. So I suggest get the hormones checked, look into it, see where you're at. But the first solution, the first answer should not be just get on testosterone replacement therapy, because I've seen a lot of people do that, not correct the issues, and not get anywhere fast, even though they're on hormone replacement. So the first thing you have to do is you got to dial in your sleep. You have to dial in your sleep. Because remember, if you are not sleeping, your stress hormones are elevated, it's compounding the problem. You got to bring down brain inflammation, and you got to get your metabolism back in check, okay? So my recommendation is do whatever it takes to sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. You should put a velvet rope around that. That is the thing that you are going to focus in on more than anything. Because that's the one thing we know you need to adapt to, is you have to learn how to sleep well. You got to turn your room into a bat cave, as dark as possible, and you want it to be cold. I talk about this a lot. I'm just going to reiterate. Dark and cold. I learned it from Charles Poliquin, and a lot of people reiterate it. Turn your room into a bat cave. The darker it is, the colder it is, the more natural melatonin you can produce. The body has to cool off to hit deep sleep. That will dramatically help you. Remember, your hormones reproduce in the first 2 sleep cycles at night, those deep sleep cycles. That's when all your hormones are reproducing themselves, and that's when all the repair is happening to your body. So it's super critical that you sleep well. I love people that have a journal that they write in before they try to go to sleep. What are the most important things you have to do the next day? What are things you're grateful for? Dr. Parsley also had a great suggestion as well. I've never tried this, but I'm going to implement it. What are the things you're worrying about? Write them all down. And just tell yourself, okay, I got them written down. I can't do anything about it tonight when I'm laying in bed, but I can worry about it tomorrow or next week or whenever that comes. Get your brain into a great state where it can stay calm and de-stress itself and get you to fall asleep. I also talk a lot about some of the supplements I like to take before bed. I'm a big fan of magnesium. If you're someone whose brain's stressing out or you've had some trauma in your brain, try magnesium threonate. It brings down brain inflammation. It calms the brain down. I'm also a big fan of magnesium bisglycinate before bed. Those are my favorite 2 supplements to use, one or the other. If you've had some brain trauma issues or concussions, try the threonate. If you haven't, try the magnesium bisglycinate. 2 great ways to help you fall asleep at night. If you want other strategies on the sleep, I'm not going to reiterate all of them. You can go back and listen to some of the other podcasts, but there's lots of suggestions through this podcast on how to sleep better. Number 2, you have got to create a lifestyle to make you resilient to stress. It's not going away. It's always going to be there. The first thing I learned about with stress and the mistakes I was making with my nutrition was after everything had happened, I called Rob Wolf. I was going to do a podcast with him, and I just asked him, like, man, here's what's going on in my life. I'm following the paleo diet. Here's what's happened. And he's like, man, he goes, high-performing people under a lot of stress who like to exercise, they have to have carbohydrates in their diet. They have a stress hormone problem. You take carbs out, it'll drive it even more, and they'll end up in the same blood chemistry scenario of people that aren't stressed and don't like to work out or eating too many carbs. So he taught me how to integrate carbohydrates back into my diet. And the best thing I found is strategically eat carbs. You don't want to have carbs every meal, because if you have carbs every meal, that can cause the testosterone levels to stay lower. What I found is I eat meals during the day without carbs, and then my last meal of the day, dinner, always has carbs. And then the other time of day that I'll eat carbohydrates is right after I work out. I just do a simple protein shake of protein powder and carb powder. I personally use Carbolin. And I just use those 2 things to help bring the stress of the workout down. And then I eat carbs at night at dinner to bring stress of life down. And having carbs at dinner has been proven now to help you get better sleep. That strategy is amazing. And then I think things like meditation is really, really powerful, especially if you've had some brain stuff. Meditation is really critical to implement, help calm your system down. And it's something that worked really, really well for me was deprivation float tank therapy. I found some research that had been done on people that had brain injuries with float tanks and how fast it was able to heal the brain and help aid the brain. So I started doing a float tank. And what it is, you sit in it's a body of water that's warm with a lot of magnesium. So you float in it, you relax in it. It's pitch black and there's no sound. So all sensory is just sensory deprivation. So there's no sound, there's no sight, there's nothing. You just lay there and completely relax. And I can't remember who I learned it from, but it was a past SEAL. I've learned a lot from people who've worked with SEALs. I've got to know a bunch of them, and they've told me about people that they work with. So I got to study some great people. And I can't remember who it was. It was someone who'd worked with the East Coast SEALs. They use deprivation float tanks to help them heal from concussions quicker. And so I implemented that and did some wonderful things for calming my brain down and my ADD down. So I highly recommend that as well. I also used something called Meriva. Thorne product called curcumin has Meriva in it. And Meriva is the one form of curcumin. Curcumin is a natural anti-inflammatory, can pass the blood-brain barrier and actually bring down brain inflammation. And by doing that, it helped me sleep better as well and brought my stress levels down. So those are some great, simple strategies. Another thing that I really liked is a product by Thorne called Stress Balance. I would take 2 of those a day. It's all these adaptogens that would help me deal with stress better. I use this a lot with my clientele that are high stressed. So I'm taking magnesium before bed. I'll have them do that thorn curcumin to bring down inflammation in general and brain inflammation. And then I'll have them use stress balance as adaptogens to help their body handle stress better during the day. And then it's also critical you eat enough protein and good fats, especially some saturated fat every day. You incorporate that and just eat those on the meals you're not having the carbs with. And now you're giving the body the saturated fat and the cholesterol that it needs to make sex hormones off of. Your body has to use cholesterol to make sex hormones. So you want to have some of that coming in. So have some animal meat, have some saturated fat, use that cholesterol to enhance your hormones. So it's really simple. Just have meals throughout the day that don't have carbs, have good fats in it and lots of protein, and then a meal at night that has the carbohydrates in it. Get both of those to your benefit. If you're doing all these things, you should see, and those are the things I've seen work the best to help naturally bring testosterone levels up on minute. It works actually fairly quickly. Like within 8 to 12 weeks of just implementing those simple strategies, it'll help boost your testosterone. I'll be honest, I haven't seen a lot of success using any specific supplement that has been touted to boost testosterone. I haven't seen big returns on those, but I have seen big returns on lifestyle. Also, make sure you're not overdoing cardiovascular training, especially HIIT training. I have found lifting weights, staying in like anywhere from 6 to 12 rep ranges with 60 to 90 seconds rest between each set, be really, really good for the hormonal profile. Too much HIIT training and too much long endurance training week to week can really be detrimental to testosterone as well. In my experience, I don't have the studies to validate it. I'm just saying what I see. I see blood chemistry all the time. We implement these strategies or what's going on, and I see how it affects blood chemistry and testosterone. And too much high-intensity training and too much cardiovascular training, I've seen have a negative benefit on it. So 1 or 2 HIIT trainings a week and keeping your volume of aerobic activity. I can't remember the exact number that I've seen. I actually saw a study on this. I can't remember what it was, but just don't overdo it. And lift weights, I like 3 times a week for people that are middle-aged. It's kind of like the sweet spot for about 45 minutes. Don't push your weightlifting sessions or your HIIT sessions past 45 minutes because what will happen is your testosterone will drop and your stress hormones will start to take off after that. Eastern Bloc countries showed us that decades ago. So be really, really cautious of that. Now, if you're doing all these things and your blood chemistry is still not improving your testosterone levels, you're still not seeing an elevation in those, that's when you want to go see a hormone therapist. Now, old school way was you would take 1 injection a month. That has been shown not to be the most optimal way to do it. So a lot of the doctors that I now talk with and work with, I really have found once a week, sometimes twice a week, even one of my clients gets it 3 times a week. Smaller doses more often is much more efficient than a big dose at any one point. So if you're working with someone who does hormone replacement therapy, make sure you're doing less more often versus like one big one once a month because that gets a big rise and a huge crash and it's not very fun that way. Also, make sure whoever you're working with is tracking your blood chemistry. They should be looking at things like hematocrit levels, is your blood thickening? They also be looking at estradiol levels, DHT levels, making sure that testosterone is being used efficiently and appropriately without increasing any type of risk for you. So estradiol is just your estrogen levels. We don't want those too high. We want to keep those on the lower level of normal. Hematocrit levels, if those levels get above normal, it means your blood's starting to thicken a little bit. So a lot of doctors I work with, that I use with my clients and stuff, they recommend when that starts to happen, you go give blood. Bring those levels down. Keep the blood thin so you don't have to worry about anything like a stroke. So I'm a big supporter of it. But here's the thing. Just remember, it's never the first line of defense, okay? If you feel horrible, nothing's going well, you have all those symptoms I talked about earlier, change your lifestyle first. Because if you don't change your lifestyle and you just go on the therapy, it'll be half as effective as it would be if you change your lifestyle first. And so often what I see is men change that lifestyle, sex hormones optimize naturally, you don't have to go on the therapy. And that's the ideal way to go about it because really once you start therapy, it's really hard to come off therapy. I know you can do it, but what I've seen with the clientele I work with, it's really hard to come off it once you've started. And I'm not talking about going on steroids. Yes, things like testosterone, sipping, things like that work, but talking about using just enough to bring your levels to high normal. Like for me, I feel great keeping my levels around 700 to 900. Remember, the high level is 1200. If my levels start getting too high, I start to get anxious. I don't like that feeling. So I found my sweet spot is 700 to 900. So I work really hard on my lifestyle to keep it in that realm at all times. That's when I feel my best. And there's a misperception if you're at the high level of normal or high testosterone levels that you're super aggro and angry. No, I don't find that. What I've noticed is my levels get low, I have no emotion. But when my levels are optimal, I can feel my emotion. I can cry. Like all these things can come out of me. I feel like a normal human being. I don't feel aggro or agitated like I want to go fight. I'm sure if you start taking super physiological dosages where your numbers are getting up over 2,000, I'm sure that can create some problems. But I'm not talking about doing that. I'm talking about doing whatever it takes to keep you in the high level of normal to where your levels would have been when you're 25. Like that's kind of the time of our life when we're at our best. We're just trying to keep those levels around that point. And I've just found, like I said, my sweet spot is that. Some of my clients like to be a little bit higher. None of them, I've never met one that wants to be lower than that or feels great lower than that. But around my level or a little higher is kind of the sweet spot if that's something you're going to be doing. But just make sure the doctor you're working with is taking your blood chemistry every 6 weeks or so to make sure that everything you're doing is staying in place. I'll eventually have one of these doctors I work with come on and I'll interview them and talk deeper about this because I want to get into above and beyond just hormone therapy. I'm a really big fan of peptide therapy. They've actually been around for a long time. The Russians were using it back in the 80s, but they're kind of like the new thing in our world here in America that people are really getting into, and I'm a really big fan of them. But I'm not going to try to explain them because I will not do them justice. I've been learning about them, testing them. What they do, we all have natural peptides in our body. They just help our bodies produce more of certain things if we're lagging on them. But I'll save that for when I bring on an expert to talk about it because I want to do a deep dive on it with you, but I want to make sure the deep dive is one done with justice versus my little bit of understanding of where I'm at right now, okay? So I hope that helps. If you're having those same symptoms that I was having, that so many of my high performers have, you do not have to suffer through it, okay? Just apply these simple strategies I gave you and enjoy the difference it makes in your life. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you do these things, all of a sudden you're going to be this ripped human being. It's not what I promote. I do not believe that being super lean and super ripped is the best life there is. It's actually really hard to do. I think it's a little bit unhealthy. I've seen people be able to do it and sustain it. But what I'm saying is how to create the best version of you that has a lot of drive, a lot of energy, a lot of presence, looks good and is healthy and gets things done the way they want to get them done in life. Okay? All right, have a great week, and I'll chat with you next week.